Welcome everybody to this month's Connect with Remedy webinar. We are presenting on Smart IT 2.0, configurability, and customization. If during the presentation you have any questions, you can ask them to our panelists in the Q&A pod of this WebEx event, and they will answer them during this presentation. And at this time, I'll turn it over to John Hall to take us through the material.
Thank you, Gregory. Hopefully you're hearing me loud and clear. Good morning, good afternoon. Good morning, everybody. So thanks very much for joining this webinar today. I think it's a pretty exciting one for those of us who've been around the Smart IT product line for the 3 years or so that the product has been available, a little over 3 years. For those of you who've been on all or part of this journey with us, you'll probably be aware we set out with Smart IT to really make a big difference to the user experience that support people involved with using Remedy ITSM had as part of their interaction with our tool. And our objectives were several-fold. Firstly, we wanted to make the tool delightful to use. When people are using tools like this in their day job, often all day, every day, a great user experience leads to happy users. But also, it was always intended to drive business results. Tools like Smart Recorder for ticket logging were designed to move the bar on interactions that I think most people were kind of regarding as a little bit commodified. We disagreed. We spent a huge amount of time working with many of you, our UX teams and our product managers and our developers, getting close to customers, understanding customers, and really, I think, creating something that has been very exciting and new in this market. Over those years, a handful of years, we've added more and more personas. We've added new features along the way. We've now reached a point with, we got to a point with Smart IT 1.6 where most frontline support personas were now included, and while we will continue to push out features for those personas and continue to identify new ones, but I think we all knew as we went along that one thing we were keen to get to was to make the tool more configurable. We have a long history of Remedy being a very customizable, configurable, tailorable solution, and we want Smart IT to be no exception to that. While we always endeavor to deliver great out-of-box software, nearly every customer has something small, even that they feel could optimize their experience in a way that's maybe is specific to their company and not to many others, and being able to make those small differences or even large differences to the way the out-of-box product works is pretty fundamental to Remedy and its success and to its customers. So I'm very pleased now to be presenting Smart IT 2.0. This is a product that's been now live and deployed since December. You might be aware we've done that on a controlled availability basis, and I'll talk a little bit about that later, but actually it's still the full released version of the product. It's simply, controlled availability was simply a means to ensure that BMC was able to provide the most focused support to the people who needed it most promptly, while also giving a broader set of users access. So we're now reaching the end of that controlled availability period. The product will soon be fully available in the usual way, and it will continue to be part of the standard Remedy licenses for most ITSM users. So this, again, is still BMC's investment in the existing users of Remedy and in new users of Remedy in the future. So with that, I want to talk about some of the things that are coming in this release. That'll be the first thing I cover, just a quick overview. Then we'll look into more detail at how we've made the ticket console more configurable, how you can move fields around the form, change the layout of the form, whether that's using custom fields or amending the way out-of-box fields work. We'll look at the way you can use expressions to make things happen dynamically on the form. And those of you who've used active links in the past will probably sort of feel hopefully a sense of familiarity with many of those concepts. We'll look at something very powerful, which is the newly extended provider actions capability, which enable you to do small or significant pieces of customized workflow on the server side and to allow the user now to really interact with them on their client. And that's something I'm looking forward to showing you, because I think that in particular is a very powerful feature for Smart IT. And then, of course, as usual with these Connect with Remedy webinars, the presentation will include some pointers to specific documentation, and we'll be taking Q&A through the session. If you have questions, please feel free to answer them on chat. We've got a really great team of people from across the UX team, product management, development in no particular order, and support. So you have a good team of panelists waiting for questions on the chat. And if there's anything we have to take away and just follow up on, we'll include that in the final Q&A that gets published. So without further ado, let's get into what's coming. I'm going to be doing presentations. I'm also going to be doing some live demos of some of these features. So I've been looking forward to this very much. To give you an overview of what we've done, these are the key things you'll be seeing. Forms are now much more configurable. Fields can be much more dynamic. As we said, provider actions get a real revamp to enable them to be to tie into custom workflow on the server side. There's also some nice adds that sound simple but are very important to a lot of people, like the ability to place custom fields on ticket consoles. And as we go, I'll refer to one or two examples of the usual release by release enhancements that we make to the product with each iteration, with each version. So moving on, let's take a look. Firstly, I wanted to talk about the ticket console, and I'm going to share my browser here and get straight into this. So let's just get to the browser. Can I just check from one of the BMC people? Are we seeing the browser okay on the WebEx?
Yes, sure can see it, John. Thank you.
Excellent. So welcome to Smart IT version 2. As you see, the look and feel on the front here is not dramatically different. But just to start, I'll show you one of the more simple updates, as we say. Here is the standard ticket console. But what I can now do, if I come to this little ... button here, which is present previously for adding new columns, you'll notice, I hope, that rather than just being a BMC selected set of additional columns which you can add, we also have some obviously custom fields here. We've made them pretty obvious, I think, custom text, custom date and time. And I can very easily add those onto the console. I can drag them around. Once they're there, if I save this, you'll see the console updates, and now we can see them. And actually they are, although I haven't put any data in them yet, they are sortable and they are filterable. Oops, I've opened that record. Which means that now that they're on there, you'll see that I can actually filter on that field as well. So this is pretty important for a lot of customers. Often when you've added new attributes to a form, you're telling us that those things are pretty important. That's very understandable. They may be quite fundamental to the way you categorize and group and tickets or organize work. And so actually being able to include them in console filters, as well as showing them on the console, was a very common ask and something we've happily delivered. While we're here, by the way, I wanted to show you something. I mentioned that we'll be showing some specific enhancements that have come from customer feedback. This is one. In previous versions of Smart IT, the console refreshed as soon as you selected anything in this list of filters. That's one thing that's come back to us with a fair amount of feedback from customers to say that refresh each time you select something can be a little time consuming and blocking, because if you have a lot of tickets coming up in a search, it might take a little while to render. So now we just have this additional step. When we've selected the filters, we click apply, and apart from that, everything works just the same. And that's going to be that one additional click is hopefully pretty minor, but it certainly makes the form flow a lot better as you are adding multiple, potentially multiple filter categories to your query there. Okay, let's come back to the WebEx presentation that we just quickly stopped sharing, because what I want to do now is talk about one of the slightly bigger pieces, and this is the ability to enable you to to actually amend and vary the layout of forms. In Smart IT 1.6 and previous versions, you may be aware you can add additional fields, and you can add them in a number of different places on the form. But the flexibility of that was, that solved some requirements for some customers, but we really felt the need to extend that much further. So coming back again to our Smart IT client here, what you'll now see is that under the screen configuration menu here, we have a slightly different look and feel for instant and change forms. And that look and feel, it includes the fact that as I scroll down through these sections, I'm hoping you can see quite clearly that they are highlighted as I move through them. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to click into one of those sections and just show you what's there. So now each of the sections is now organized with the fields in it. And it's very straightforward now to make changes to those things. I mean, even if it's just as simple as dragging the order they appear, that's pretty easy. I can actually remove out-of-box fields if I want to. As soon as I click X, that's removed. It will tell me in this case that it's actually a mandatory field. So if I do remove that one, I may have some issues. But we can actually, if you want, you can take out-of-box fields and replace them with something, or if you're not using them at all, you can just take them off the view and simplify things for the users. There's also the ability to add in custom fields again. In this case, if I take that custom text field I was filtering, I can just put it right there in that section. And then when I save this and open a record, you should now see that there in this part of the form, without any data in yet, is the custom text field. A few things to be aware of here. Firstly, to better support this custom text, this custom layout capabilities, we thought long and hard about the section-by-section edit that was the user experience sort of paradigm in previous versions of Smart IT. And what I meant by that was in 1.6 and before that, or right back to the first version, each of these sections had its own edit button, which meant you can kind of edit them in stages. Now, that's something that tested well initially with the user base, but hasn't really stood the test of long-term popularity. Quite a few people fed back that they felt it was additional clicks they didn't want to be doing. Actually, when it came to doing this, the layout configuration on forms, we actually, again, figured that was going to be a challenge, because if people were moving their layout around, it might really sort of spoil the context that was behind that sectional edit anyway. So we put out there that to a lot of our kind of the customers we were talking with, should we go for just a regular single edit mode? And that's what we have now. We have this single edit view, which enables you to kind of make all the changes in one open edit form. There's always this floating save and cancel bar. That was one of the first things we iterated on as we were designing this, because we figured you always want to have those buttons available. And also, there are still some of the really assistive things that help make Smart IT what it is. So actually, assignment still uses this pop-out blade. It still gives you this viewpoint to show, what the various options are for assignment, and to help do auto assignment, for example. So this is what we call single edit, the single edit view, and this is now the standard on Smart IT too. Anyway, there is our field, so I can of course put a value in it. I also wanted to talk at this point about some of the other things you saw when I was editing this view. So let me come in here and just show you something that was on screen that I didn't call out previously. When we're looking at a form, not everything is in a standard data field. Even when I click edit, we can, although when I click edit, we can see those fields. When the screen is rendered in a view mode, it actually concatenates them into what we call a widget. And widgets are things that we supply out of the box that kind of make Smart IT more than just a plain old form full of fields, but include, in the example of customer here, they include some useful information. That the VIP flag would appear there if Joe was a VIP. I can see Joe's current status. So when you're editing fields, or editing layouts rather, you will see these widgets. And a widget effectively concatenates a number of fields into an object, and we supply these out of box and enable you to work with them. What's important to be aware of is that when fields are encapsulated in a widget, you do not have the option to add them again. It doesn't really work very nicely with sort of workflow behaviors to have multiple instances of the same field. I don't know of any product that really does that. So when I try and add first name, it tells me this field is a member of customer widget. Now, if hypothetically I wanted to, if I didn't like everything that a widget did, and I just wanted to simplify things down and use a couple of the fields, then I can do that too. So I could actually, as soon as I take out the customer widgets, you'll see that first name and last name and the other fields in there are now available just as standalone fields. So if I wanted to, I could just take that widget away altogether, save this layout. I'll just reopen this incident, and you'll see what's happened now is it's taken that widget away, and it just, all I've got now is the fields. So I don't necessarily think people would typically do that with that particular widget, but it's worth being aware. You have that depth of control now over the over even some of the out-of-box objects that are pieces of BMC supplied UX, and you know, that's I'm going to put the customer widget back though because it's a good one. So as you go through this, you will see a number of things where, you know, it might be a single field in a widget, it might be multiple ones, but what that means is there's a little bit more layout design or functionality around those fields that is part of the Smart IT view, but we've even given you the flexibility to change that. Okay, so quite a lot of interesting things there, and if I come back to the slides for one moment, let me also, you know, talk about, go in a little more detail on widgets, but also talk about what we need to do to make this happen. I know this is a fair, you know, we always assume with Connect with Remedy that you are looking for some technical info about how to do these things. One question that does come up is, you know, how do I add a field to the Smart IT view? Does it need to be added in the Developer Studio? Currently, the answer is yes. You do this in a very similar way to the way you've always been able to add custom fields into Smart IT. So the actual data fields are still managed, created, and maintained in Dev Studio. Smart IT consumes them and enables you to add them to the layout. And so what we need to just ensure, and say this is nothing particularly new, if you want to create that custom field and add it in Smart IT, you need to make sure it's on the standard places in the ITSM in the ITSM forms themselves, accessed through Dev Studio. So it just needs to be there on HBD Help Desk, and then a couple of what we call the interface forms. And if you're using SLM, it needs to be just in this join as well. And this is all documented. It's something we might simplify in future, but we thought about this and thought, actually, we don't often add fields. This isn't adding a huge amount of additional time to the operation, so we focused really on things that would make the Smart IT configurability more powerful, and we probably look in future to simplify these tasks. But as I say, hopefully it's not too onerous to add a field to a handful of forms. So these are the fields for the incident view. These are the fields for the change view. Once those things are in there, they're completely accessible in Smart IT. You can drop them in wherever you need to. And as you'll see in a moment, you can do some pretty cool dynamic things with them in addition to adding them to the form. Just another note on widgets to summarize that, you know, this is widgets, you can make them do things like other fields, and we'll go into that in a little more detail. But it's just important to reiterate, if a field is embedded in a widget, then that's where it sits as long as the widget is on the form. But you do have that option to remove the widget and apply these fields separately, and you know that gives you that extra control over the look and feel. So what have we seen so far? You've seen that you now have the ability to substantially change the layout of forms. You can simplify things. You can change the way they appear, the way they're presented. one of the nice bits of news about this, by the way, and subsequent changes that I'll show you, is that this stuff also works on mobile. So, you know, when you make a change to the layout of a form, you also get those custom fields on mobile, and I'll show you shortly as we look at dynamic behaviors. I'll fire up the mobile client, and we'll also see those things in action. And this is a nice sort of step forward, because you don't have, you know, you're not limited on mobile. So just quickly, let me share my mobile client, and we'll get an early taster of that. So here is a Smart IT 2 mobile client running off this same server, and as you see, that custom text field is there in the middle of the screen now. If I go into edit mode, then, you know, here it is available for me to edit. One thing that's worth knowing about this is that effectively the sections that you saw on the browser, they get rendered vertically, section by section, on the mobile client and on phones. On tablets, it works pretty much exactly the same way as the universal client, so you'll get a very sort of similar layout. But each of those sections on the screen configuration, they will get rendered in mobile, from top to bottom, effectively. And that, when we've tested that out, it works really nicely. It kind of gives you a single point of editing for both the phone and the web client. That's the way things are for now. Okay, so that's layout we've looked at. But now let's take a look at some of the things that I think really start to make this even more powerful. We do get asked, you know, will Smart IT ever support active links? Will it ever run active links? The answer probably is no, not exactly as they are today. Active links on mid-tier, you know, the client-side workflow pieces, they are very powerful in terms of what they can do, and that power is a strength, but it's also a challenge, because really modern browsers are not really architected around heavy client-side processing. A typical web application blueprint in a textbook these days would call the client layer validation and have the server doing most of the work. We know that our users have a lot of things they want to do on the client, though, because the client is the key to, you know, giving the user a well-guided, intuitive experience. And actually, when we look at what active links do, I would imagine more than 95% of the actions in active links out there are either set fields or change fields actions. So actions that change the data in fields, or actions that change the properties of a field, but whether it's visible or hidden, whether you can write to it at that point, whether it's mandatory or optional. And so what we've done with Smart IT 2 is introduced something we call these dynamic expressions, and they, as you see here, they are designed to execute as the user works on a record. So let's come back to the browser, and we will take a look at some dynamic expressions. So let's do this with, I'm going to do this with the field I created, but we could do it with pretty much anything. I like doing it on the custom field I've been working with. If you've used the form configuration interface with Smart IT 1.6 or previous, you'll probably know you can tick a box to hide a field or make it required, but it's pretty absolute. It's either required or it's not. What we can now do with Smart IT 2 is make that property change data-driven. So, you know, as I say, it looks a lot like the change fields action in active links. If, for example, I want to make this field read-only when the incident is in progress. That's a typical example of when people lock fields down, is when a record is in a certain state. So I'll just use this simple example. As I start typing, it helps me out with the fields here. So I can select the status field. It's a double equals and in progress. As soon as I've done that, you see it's not giving me any more guidance. It's happy with that formula. If you click this link here, it's a direct punch out to the documentation with lots of examples of different operators, you know, the ands and ors and things. So that's worth knowing about if you're playing with this. So now what have we got? We've got we now have a field which is going to be read-only if the status is in progress. Let's save that and let's give it a look. All I need to do is just reopen that ticket. It doesn't need a cache refresh or anything. It picks it up as I open the record. If you remember, here is our field. I'm going to just set this incident to assigned. We'll start from maybe the state we'd expected it to be in when we receive it. So maybe I pick it up as a support agent. I'm going to go into edit mode, and you see I have access to that field until the moment that status is set to in progress, and now I don't. So this, as I said, this runs very dynamically in the client. It executes as things happen. I mean, that's a pretty simple example, but of course, you know, it'd be easy to put a longer expression together to cover multiple things. And there are also system keywords as well as the ability to use data fields from here. So you can, you know, we have as if you were working in mid-tier, you can use various keywords to evaluate who the user is, or what group they're in, or what time it is, or all the usual things that are kind of environmental variables rather than data variables on the form. Let's go a step further. I also want to do something to set the values of that field on the client side. And I can do that in a very similar way. So here's my set value. What I need to do, let's tie it to the status being in progress again. Now what we can do here is effectively an if, then else. So if this condition applies, I'm going to set this to, let's just keep it simple, hello and goodbye. Oops, text. And as I say, what you can do is you can just, if you click straight off there, that same link applies, you can come in and validate this. So this is the one I'm using. I'm using this if, then else structure. I'm not just looking at the documentation to sanity check my own work, I promise. I am. Okay, so now when I come into that record, what you'll see is that you should actually see that it should have already set the value, if I've done that formula right. That's a good sign. So there it is. It's on goodbye. So remember, it was if it's in progress, set it to hello. Else, set it to goodbye. I'm going to come in and edit that value again and edit this status again. So remember, what we should see is when this is set to in progress, it should write a different value to that, and it should also lock the field. And there we go. That's what it's done. So that's good. That worked. Which is always nice when doing a demo to get these things correct. And again, you know, this stuff works on mobile too. This works on mobile too. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just come back into my mobile client for a moment. Let's share the QuickTime for the mobile client. So hopefully you're seeing that. I've just picked a record. Let's come in. So here I have an incident ticket, and when I edit that, you'll see that because this is in progress, you notice the status there moving towards the top of the screen now, and because, so we have that custom text field, it's locked down, it says hello. When I edit that status, if I change that to assigned and submit that, we've now got the custom text of goodbye. So it should have, it's changed that. It's changed that custom text. Not sure what it's done with the edit mode. Let me take a look at that offline afterwards. Okay, so I think I need to save the change for that to work. That's right on mobile. But anyway, the important thing is that the dynamic behaviors that you're seeing, for the first time, really, we've got that level of configurability on mobile as well. It's always been back in the past. We had some. We had our old Aeroprise-based mobile form builder for on older mobile platforms, which allowed some of that. But with Smart IT, what we've always aimed to do is to have pretty good parity between the UC, the Universal Browser Client, and mobile. For a number of reasons, we've always wanted Smart IT to be, if not mobile first, certainly a mobile equal, because some things genuinely better on the browser. Some things are going to be more appropriate on mobile. Some things it shouldn't matter, and that's where we sort of think of mobile equal. So if you're making these dynamic behaviors, if you're setting these rules and this logic, if you're adding custom fields and changing the layout, we wanted that to propagate to mobile as well, and to be equivalent, and that's really been the key thing we've been aiming for there. Okay, so quite a lot already that you've seen. You've seen the ability to create, dynamic behaviors which change both the properties of a field and the value. I wanted to just show you in a little more detail how some of these expressions work, because I'm sure for this audience that's pretty important to know. We've got, firstly, it's very, for conditional expressions, you've seen this example. It's very simple. It's, the field is prefixed by a $sign. You have that assistance as you type to help you get to the right field. These expressions, by the way, are very much parallel with a lot of other expression-driven logic in our most recent products as well. We're trying to keep consistent across the BMC stack. So although not quite the same as old mid-tier ones, they are very much in line with other things we're doing. You also have that ability to use Boolean operators in all the ways you'd imagine, and nested brackets and the like. So in this case, I'm showing you how different ands and ors can be combined into a single expression. When you are using the set values, you've got some options. I showed you the if this, then that, else that construct, but you can also do string operations like this append is the obvious example. I should probably put it so there's a space between these things, just because that would more likely be the thing. We've got a set of keywords which are well documented, and actually you can also just return a true or false value. And of course, that might be very useful for if you're kind of cascading actions, because something's got to be tested, and then you might want to sort of pick off that and do something else, either in a filter or a provider action or even another expression. So that's worth, as I say, I would encourage you to take a look at that document page. It's linked at the end of this presentation, and of course, it's linked from the expression builder in Smart IT. So you would have, that will give you a good starting point for using those. Okay, next up, I want to talk about the, we've talked about client-side operations so far, and those of you who have, which is probably many of you who have worked with Remedy workflow, will probably recognize that although I've talked about the set fields action, all I really did was some client-side evaluation. I wasn't doing any kind of lookup. I wasn't going to the server. I wasn't pulling anything in from another form. And actually, those client-side dynamic actions are not designed to do that. But here is something that can do that. Provider actions are basically filters. Filter workflow, rather. They're not individual filters necessarily, but they are filter workflow that can be called from the Smart IT client. They are not brand new as a construct. We've had this in the application for a while, in the Smart IT module for a while. But previously, they've been a pretty, they've been a little bit of a throw over the wall kind of call. You called them from a record. The provider action could pull in data behind the scenes from that record, do stuff, write data back, but the user didn't really get any interaction with it from the moment they had done that. So it's still useful, and we still retain an option to do something similar to that. But what we've now done is it's much more controllable by the administrator. So you can, as you'll see in a moment with provider actions, we can now map values in and out of that provider action in a more dynamic way. So it's not just a block that runs in the background. You can actually share code and use it on different in different circumstances, because you could map different fields in and out depending on what you want to do with the action in any particular point. We can also run them. What I described before, that kind of throw it to the server, let the server do what it does, that we would call a synchronous action. But we can also run an asynchronous action, and that means we can actually trigger it on the client, and the user waits for it to finish, and they immediately see the results once it's finished. So just to go into a little more detail on that concept, let me just, what I'll do is I'll show you how we set these up, and then we'll talk a little more about when you would use asynchronous, when you would use synchronous. But firstly, let me show you how provider actions look in Smart IT, and then we'll go a little bit behind the scenes and show how we set them up. So let me reshare my browser, and I will firstly, in the Smart IT, in the Smart IT window, I'm going to come here and come to the configuration screen again. So here we go, add remove actions. If you're familiar with actions in Smart IT, you might well know that there are several types of action. I'm going to remove this because I'm going to do this from scratch. We have URL actions which simply define a URL, and they can be submitted with different data from the record. They're very useful. I mean, a simple example might be, hey, let's trigger a Google search based on some fields. We have people using these for all sorts of interactions with their other systems. Provider actions, though, these are much more about running workflow on the server. So I've got a provider action that we've created here called update title. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to make it available on both desktop and mobile to be run. And I'm going to make it available on both view and edit mode on a form. And now you'll see what we have is some mappings in and out of this provider action. In a moment, we'll show how those are defined. But anyway, what I want to do is just run this. So we've got what we've actually got with the filters on this, we've got a trigger that means it only runs if this value, update title value is sent. That's just a absolute text value that's sent to the filters as a, to say this is actually you do run. There's a run if condition on the filters, and this just stops it being triggered by any other operation that happens to meet the run if criteria for that filter. We're dedicating this filter to this specific action, but that's kind of an optional step, but it's good practice. What we're going to do as well is we're going to take some data from the ticket that we're running this from. So I'm just going to take the contact company. And I'm going to ask the user to enter some data as well. So if I just select user prompt, then that's all I need to do. I'm going to map this back to the summary of the ticket. Let's give it a name in English. We can also localize it if we want to. And we'll save that. Yeah, so that's done. I somehow was creating not sure what I've done there. Let me just quickly run through this again. I think I was I'm not quite sure how I managed to stop that action working properly. User prompt, summary. I'm going to make this asynchronous as well, by the way, and save that. So now hopefully we should have our provider action defined. By making it asynchronous, it will actually run in the user's view. And like I say, we'll talk about that in a moment. So let's pull up this incident again. Our provider action is now going to be visible on this menu, update title. And it's worth doing this just to show you what it does as well. It's quite a simple thing, this, but it's going off, and I'm going to enter this custom field, this custom text, hello. And what it's doing is it's updating the title here. This ticket was created for company. There's no company name, so it's not filled that in. With custom text of hello. So it's tried to find obviously I don't have a contact company there. I use contact company rather than the actual company. So it's tried to insert that value in the form. It's also created a custom text and that's all run on a filter. So it's actually gone off to the server, executed that logic based on a filter, but you notice it hadn't actually saved it to the record. And one of the cool things about doing this as an asynchronous action like that is you can actually do some quite powerful stuff and make it look like it's running on the client. It feels like client workflow. But in line with better practices for web applications, it's actually the server doing the heavy lifting, not the browser. We have customers who've talked about using this to change the rules for change risk analysis. I've had a customer talk about using it to consult a call-out rotor that they've implemented. This is all stuff that really the server should be doing, but you can make it appear to the user as if it's running in their client. Of course, if you want it just to look like it's running on the server, probably the best thing to do is just build some filters. But that's not what we're aiming for here. We're aiming for that customized experience on Smart IT. But there's another trick here as well. Remember our custom field here? If you notice, when I pull down this menu, and I know we've already been manipulating this field quite substantially, so why not do some more? You'll notice I can click this Associate Action flag here, and I can pick that provider action, and I can pick an icon for it. I don't know what I'm going to pick. Let's just pick anything. I always pick a different one. So this pushpin icon here. Now, when I reopen this incident, you'll see on that custom text field that there is that pushpin icon. So there it is, and that appears both in the this view mode and edit mode. And when I click that, it's going to rerun that provider action and redo my my logic there. So what we're looking for with this now is that instead of having to come up to that menu, which I first used to trigger this action, I can now see the action in the context of what I'm doing. If for example, this is for risk analysis on a change, you would probably want that to kind of be ideally, you may want that at least to be in line with those risk fields. It makes more sense to the user. It fits in better to the flow of what the ticket is doing. So, what the user is doing with the ticket, and hopefully makes the system more intuitive. And so that's quite a nice thing to do with provider actions, actually put them there in the context of the user's viewpoint. So that's hopefully something pretty useful, pretty nice for you as well. But of course, it's worth knowing, I'm sure you may be curious to if you've not built provider actions in the past, I'm sure you're probably a little curious to know a little more about them. So what I'll do is I'll just come back to this slide and we'll take a look. Effectively, it's relatively straightforward. If you know how to build remedy filters, and I think that's a reasonable prerequisite for this. I mean, it is about hooking into remedy AR system development. Then hopefully this should seem quite straightforward. Firstly, we need to actually just create an entry on our form, on this form, which I'll show you in a moment. And then we create the filters to drive that business logic. And you see the next things on this list: configure the on-screen interface in Smart IT and optionally associate to a field. Well, we've done that already. So really, it's just these steps here. Let me share the browser and let me show you those things. So hopefully we should have a nice, easy bookmark here to this form. So here, currently in the mid-tier, we should actually, if I just pull down update title, this is quite straightforward, really. I mean, this is just how we register. We call this creating the template. It's how we register the provider actions. It enables you to give it a name, pin it to one of the pertinent forms, and at the moment, Help Desk and Change support this enhancement, but we are aiming for more in the near term, and of course we can switch it on. But also it enables us to build these mappings. So here, as you see, we've already built these mappings to those fields. This custom action flag, which is just really about these are things that sort of give us that ability to map in the data to and fro. One of these is that kind of trigger, and one of them is the text that the user is going to enter. And then from those things, filters can interact with that information when it's submitted as part of the user firing the provider action. And if I come to the development studio here, what we will find, I've got if I look for the filter, I should find, if I filter the list of filters on update title, there we go. We just have, in this case, this quite simple single filter, which, again, we've associated to the help desk form. It runs on this service flag, and as I say, we've got this qualification to ensure that this is the right one that's triggered at the right time. That we this is the benefit of sending that value from the provider action configuration in Smart IT. This is only going to run when that's fired, so it doesn't. We're not going to trigger it inadvertently with any other action call. And in this case, this is now doing a lookup here of the values we've submitted to it, because this is a filter. We could easily have looked up value from another form. We could be triggering other filters. It's really enabling us to build a set of a workflow behind the scenes to do whatever you want it to do. You will think of 100 things that we never thought of, I'm sure, because that's the great thing about enabling our customers to tailor and customize their applications. You're going to have thought of stuff we didn't think of. Okay, so that's a quick overview of the provider actions that I think really are probably the most technically exciting thing here. Obviously, the layouts and the ability to change console columns and things are great, and that's really going to be probably the most used things for most users. But I know a lot of people on the call probably have a history of customizing and developing Remedy. I mean, that's where I started out. I started out as a Remedy developer on custom applications way too many years ago now, going back to like the late 90s. But so for me, again, it's like, okay, this is powerful because we can pull in a lot of stuff, and again, some of the things we'll look at as we move forward are how we can extend that capability further. So as promised, a quick talk about when you would run something synchronously, when you would run it asynchronously. The synchronous actions are pretty much what we implemented in previous versions, albeit now with the field mappings, they're a bit more powerful. They don't block the user. So if you're doing something that's very time consuming, if something's going to go up and do an intensive processing to come up with an answer, or not immediately be expected to have values to write back to the form, you might not want the user to wait. It might not be the most appropriate thing to do. The user might not even care about the result. It might not be relevant to them to see the result, and then so in those cases we can just send that action to the server and let the server get on with it. The asynchronous provider action still runs on the server. What I mean by that is the logic is still executed in server workflow. It does block the operation until the action completes. I mean, you saw when I did that simple operation, it was imperceptible, the delay. It was, fractions of a second. It's just going to take as long as the filter takes to run, and in many cases, that's going to be very, very negligible timing. So I wouldn't read anything negative into blocking the user's operation. It's no different to most things that a user clicks on. But the important thing is, as you saw, the user immediately gets the benefit of that operation in terms of data written to the record that's on screen. And I think probably the most fundamental reason to do that is if you're expecting the user to kind of continue working on that form with that data in place, such as what I did, which is just something simple to update a title. But in the case where you might want to go and look up who is on call and assign to them, or look up a prioritization rule that maybe isn't quite the same as the out-of-box one and is driven by filters, you would imagine mostly that user would want to carry on working. So that's the time to build it asynchronous. And like I say, I don't want the blocking the user action to be negative. It's just normal user interaction behavior. So that's a big walkthrough of the building blocks now that you have in Smart IT2 to enable you to really tailor, customize the applications. I mean, we're aware that many of you have already built these things in mid-tier. Smart IT is not likely really just to consume mid-tier code objects in the same way. It's its own interface. It has many, many strengths because of that. We started out from a fairly clean sheet and did not want to carry forward stuff that makes things potentially less responsive than they might be. We want to make sure we're kind of adhering to modern browser application standards. But what we've aimed to do is to make sure that when you do build things in Smart IT, when you do aim to deploy Smart IT to users who have not necessarily used it before, but for whom your customizations are important, that you can re-implement those as simply as possible and as dynamically as possible. So hopefully, what you should find with this version is that if you had challenges before, particularly on these primary record types, of being able to get full ownership, full traction with your user base, because there were very important customizations that Smart IT did not adequately cover in previous versions. We're hoping to have closed a lot of those gaps for you. We've worked with many customers, almost 100 different customers. We captured their customizations, documented them, evaluated them to prioritize what we're doing here. We're not really finished because we've got more forms to cover, and we'll go deeper on the functionality, I'm sure, as well. One final point, though, as well, just as hopefully this will be a good benefit too, is you've only got to kind of build these things once if you've got a dev and QA and test environment. So what I've opened up here in the browser is the deployment management console, which colloquially we always call dev to prod. Essentially, if you've not used this, it's the version 9 facility that lets you easily package up Remedy configurations and customizations and move them from one server to another. So I'm just going to very quickly show you that when you start putting one of these together, one of the content types here is Smart IT definitions. And what I mean by this is it actually supports it. You can package up your Smart IT configurations, the things I've shown you and done today, and we can then migrate them easily from dev to QA to prod in the standard way. So again, that is in line with our standards now with this deployment management console. We wanted to make sure that it extended to the new stuff on Smart IT. So you've pretty much seen you've seen quite a lot. I'm hoping it comes across well. Here are the documentation references I talked about. So this is just the standard administering link. This is kind of the parent to the others. But some important pages for you would be looking at how you configure actions, looking at how you add those custom fields to views, and then that expressions page as well, which is the one that happens to actually be linked from the tool rather conveniently. Quick summary then, what have you seen? Well, you've seen a whole host of new configurability features in Smart IT, covering the ticket console, form layouts, the behaviors of fields, the data set to fields on the client side, and the provider actions. Just to reiterate, in Smart IT 2.0, this covers the incident and change record types. So in most customer cases, that's most of the records, but we are intending to go further in the not too distant future. Any statement I make like that is subject to change, and if you need to go into more roadmap detail with us, if you have specific questions on that, this isn't the forum where we normally get into any more detail than I just have, but we are, of course, absolutely happy to speak further with you. I'm more than happy to get me or one of my colleagues on a call to talk about the roadmap in more detail. Finally, that point about controlled availability. Thank you for your patience. Those of you who have interacted with us on that, we felt we wanted to collect some additional data about who was doing what. So, and it wasn't really intended to feel like a blocker to anyone. It was just so that we made sure that our support resources were firmly focused on the people who might need them quickest and soonest for the highest priority releases. And for the rest of you, of course, we've had a great interaction in a communities forum. It's been a nice, positive experience. But it's not a beta. This is not a preview program. The product is live. It's real. It's out on the market. And we are expecting to go generally available very, very soon. We had a customer beta. The thing that's been out since December is actually the real live production product. So it's there now. And if you need to get hold of things, if you can bear with us for a handful of days, you should be able to get full access to the GA release. And in any case, speak to your account team if you need to, and let them know what you need. And that's it. Thank you very much indeed for your time. I hope this has been interesting. I hope it's been exciting. Smart IT has really, we feel, and our customers tell us, it's really raised the bar in terms of user experience, but we've always had that kind of #1 piece of feedback from the most customers being, when is it going to be customizable? And I hope you see, this is the first release when there is true configurability and customization on those primary record types. So I hope you see the journey we're on, and we're very happy to work with you and help and listen to what you need to do. Share information about what customers are doing with it. Just as I say, keep in touch with us, use the communities, use your account team. we in product management are always very keen to talk with customers, and would be happy to do so. So with that, I'm going to hand back to Greg for the final, the wrap-up and formalities. And yeah, thank you again for your time, and thank you for your continued loyalty and work with BMC. It's always a pleasure to have so many of you here as customers. Thank you.
Thank you, John, for the presentation. And at this time, we'll open it up for live Q&A. Savannah, could you provide instructions for our callers?
And if you would like to ask a question, please signal by pressing *1 on your telephone keypad. If you are using a speakerphone, please make sure your mute function is turned off to allow your signal to reach our equipment. A voice prompt on the phone line will indicate when your line is open, and please state your name before posing your question. Once again, that's *1 to ask a question, and we will pause for a moment to allow everyone an opportunity to signal. And we will take our first question. Your line is open.
Hi. It's a very nice presentation which you have given on Smart IT. I just have one question. Do we have any set field action where we can set it from another form like we do in Remedy?
So am I right in hearing that the question is, can a set fields action look up data from another form?
Yes.
Yeah. You would do that with provider actions. So yes, it's functionally, basically it's functionally equivalent, but at the moment that does need that provider action trigger. We'll probably go further than that in subsequent releases. And just the reason for that really is that again, it's this desire to kind of make the architecture of the application much more in line with kind of the way browsers are designed to make these sort of multi-tier applications work. We don't really want to be triggering multiple queries from client to server because that can impact performance. It's especially sensitive to latency, so it's not so great when things are running over wide area networks. And our guidance over the years has generally been to try and do things on filters. The great thing with provider actions is it kind of gives you the best of both, at least in terms of once, if you're able to trigger it in the way you need to. So you will get, the server's doing the heavy lifting, the user will get the benefit of it kind of happening as far as they're concerned in their web application.
And we will take our next question. Your line is open.
Hi, I'm curious in regards to the configuration of some of the forms, particularly on incident and change. I see that you can configure some of the fields to be required. When you do make a field required, does it give it that little orange stamp signifying that it's a required field?
Yeah, that's right. So because of course previously our answer might only have been, well, you can kind of make sure there's a filter there to catch it if it's not filled in, but that's not very user friendly. What we do with that make it required is it actually, it behaves in the client as you'd want it to. I think if I'm right in saying, just jump in, anyone from BMC if I've got this wrong, but it actually increments the counter that says you have X required fields left to do, and it highlights to the user that it's required.
And once again, that's *1 to ask a question, and we will take our next question. Your line is open.
Hi, if we have a customer who is using only SRM and work order, is it still possible to use Smart IT?
They're only using work order and, sorry, what was the first, the line wasn't very clear for the first word.
They have installed SRM and using the work order fulfillment application with that.
Peter, if you're there, can you? I just want to run this past you, but at the moment we would expect service.
If I remember, you may recall that Smart IT is using a specific role definition, and this is documented in our Smart IT documentation page, right? So the role concept of Smart IT is a bit more abstract versus the fine-grained user permissions that you have in the mid-tier UI. So I think if you have Smart IT, SRM and work order only, it's currently not possible to log in, as far as I remember. But you could check that. Again, you'd have to search in the documentation page for Smart IT permissions or role, and you see the page that describes this in detail.
Let's make sure we pick that up as a Q&A. We'll publish. That's one we'll just verify. I think Peter and we both think the answer is the same. It's a question that hasn't come up very often, so apologies. I'd rather give a qualified answer now and give a firm answer in the final Q&A, but I think the answer is no. I think I do agree with Peter's point of view.
And once again, that is *1 to ask a question. And we will take our next question. Your line is open.
Hey, this is Mahira. I just wanted to ask you about the permissions, like why an incident user needs a work order and a SRM permission in Smart ID.
So I can take that as well. If you want, John, I can take this as well. It's somewhat related to the earlier discussion. As I said, we based the design of Smart IT on a persona concept. And, we have defined certain roles that a user needs to have in order to access Smart IT. And one of the roles is what we call a service desk agent. Now, it is possible to use the product without SRM installed, without having work order permissions, etc. So that is possible, and you can achieve that service desk agent role, or IT agent role, I think it's called, without having SRM installed at all. But if it is installed, then in our design assumption, then in most cases, the service desk agents need to have access to work order as well to be able to look at it in case a customer calls, etc. Right? So that drove the design decision to include the work order permissions into the required list of permissions to achieve this IT agent role, right? Because again, in our experience, the service desk agents need to be able to see work orders as a user is calling in and wants to have insight into what's going on with their previously submitted requests. There are times when service desk agents need to access work orders. Right? That's the design logic behind it, right?
And we will take our next question. Your line is open.
Hello.
Hi.
Yeah.
Go ahead. We can.
So I have two questions. The first question is regarding the old mid-tier. So do you guys have any plans to phase out the legacy old mid-tier, or are they going to coexist in the future? Because it's honestly a little bit confusing for us and for our company to have like two different interfaces to accomplish the same result. So that's my first question. And the second question about the configurability of the change management, because in our company, for example, we don't use all the change types. So, it would have been really helpful if, on the main screen for the change, for us to be able to, for example, select which options are available to be selected as change types. Thank you.
Okay, I'll take those one by one. I mean, firstly, the mid-tier interface remains completely supported. There's no current intention to change that. It would be fair to say that really our investment effort is into the new generation of user experiences, the user interfaces. So Smart IT is really where we're focusing our efforts on developing and improving and evolving the product. And I understand exactly what you're saying about how that's positioned, but what we always from obviously extensively talking with customers. We have many thousands of enterprises using Remedy, ITSM. It was always going to be a little interesting. How do we we wanted to create something great. We wanted to create something new and really raise the bar in this marketplace. But to do that in a way that all those large enterprises would have to have effectively ripped and replaced their existing product would not have been advantageous to us or them. So our effort has always been to, we've put huge investment into Remedy on both the server and the UX side. If you think about Remedy 9, that represents a huge update, modernization, streamlining of the server, the AR system server. It's on a new modern code base. It's effectively become from Remedy 9, it's a very, very modern service management tool. Meanwhile, on the user experience side, Smart IT represents a whole new way of designing and thinking and working with customers and delivering really transformative features. I mean, nobody else has something like Smart Recorder, and service agents love it when they get to use it because it just makes their job better. So yeah, this has been a journey, and our current journey remains. We keep investing predominantly in Smart IT. We will continue to support mid-tier. We have a lot of people, a lot of work on mid-tier. As we move forward, we'll probably look at ways of getting more of the benefit of their custom work into Smart IT. But for the time being, it's completely part of the Remedy product. It's there, it's usable, it's supported, and we have no intention to change that. The second question was around the change types, wasn't it? That's definitely something that's under consideration for upcoming releases. We have heard that from several customers. I appreciate why you're asking, and we're certainly looking into delivering that. And that for everyone, just to clarify, that's if you're not using certain types of change, you don't want them to appear. Okay. So I hope that's answered both the questions adequately.
And we will take our next question. Your line is open.
Hi, this is Rohit. So I have a question about on the social bridge area. Is there any enhancement with the 2.0?
Not with 2.0, but there are definitely changes coming. As I say, we can't really go into roadmap detail on this call because it's publicly published, but there are some significant improvements coming and simplifications. So if you want to know more, please just if you ask the account team, or just drop us a line directly, and we'll set up a conversation.
And we will take our next question. Your line is open.
Hi, this is Larry from Wegmans Food Markets, and in respects to a idea that's on the communities for change management, the ability to copy changes has been kind of one of the impediments for adoption of Smart IT. Anything we can tell our community as to when that functionality might be available?
We're actually, again, this is one that comes up fairly often. It's certainly riding high in the ideas voting. We're intending to do something with that in an upcoming release. We will, in fact, we're looking at whether we have options for doing it now with some of the stuff we've done. So watch this space on that. Again, I can't tell you exactly when we're going to be doing anything, when or if. Obviously, I have to qualify, but we know it's important. We're doing a lot of work on that right now.
And we will take our next question. Your line is open.
Hi, do we have an ability to create a new modules? For example, IT, security, something like, if you want to create a new module, like, so we need to create all together from Remedy, and how we need to do, like, to make it visible in Smart IT?
Okay, so where we would typically point you in, we have our Innovation Suite platform, which is our, again, I've talked a bit about next generation UX in Remedy. I'm going to talk about next generation tool platform for developing this kind of service applications, especially when we go beyond ITSM, where Remedy is really our kind of core offering. So Innovation Studio would be Innovation Suite would be the place that we would typically expect customers now to be building these whole new modules. And you do have the ability to integrate in various ways with Smart IT, with Remedy. At the moment, you can't sort of directly deploy it right into the Smart IT UX as another module. But again, that's something that's under consideration, you know, how much we can kind of embed things in the screen. But the thing is, Smart IT itself is not something that's designed to render entirely new custom components. It's an application-focused UX for Remedy with a lot of customization now and configurability around what Remedy does. I think what we should probably do is maybe have a follow-up chat with you about what you're looking to do, and then we can talk about whether the best option is to, you know, if it's an entirely new standalone application, it might be worth you all looking at Innovation Suite. If it's kind of components that would be called from Remedy and stuff happens a little out of sight of the user, then of course, you know, that opens up things like provider actions as a potentially really good way of integrating that in custom fields. So I'd like to understand more. I'd love it if you would drop us a line with your details, and I'd like to follow up that conversation with you.
And we will take our next question. The line is open.
Hello. I have a question regarding the table fields. So we have some customization in incident change where we added table fields. And my understanding is this won't be available in Smart IT. So what would be the suggestion here to deal with these customizations?
It's not currently supported on these configurability enhancements, you're right. And again, it's something that's under consideration as one of the things we're looking to do potentially in future for, you know, extending that configurability. So, you know, again, we're on it. It would be interesting, again, to learn a little more about what you're doing with it, and that will help us to kind of formulate what our best route forward is there. So again, I'd invite you, if you could drop. By the way, if anybody needs to know, my email address is just john.hall@bmc.com. So very simple. I'll just put it in the chat. If you wanted to drop me a line, we can have that conversation in a little more detail. But just to reiterate, it's not currently supported, but it's one of the things we are looking into as we extend this.
And once again, that's *1 to ask.
The access based on support group, that was kind of like half implemented in 9.1. In 9.1.2, it was totally implemented with a company-based option. So I wanted to see, are there any other plans for ITSM? Because if I believe correctly, in ITSM, when ITSM 9 came out, BMC said, well, there's no more functional changes in ITSM, everything is in Smart IT, and then 9.1 came out with this very drastic change on ticket access.
I'm going to hand over the question. I don't feel we should have ever communicated that there's no changes in Remedy. I mean, that's not the case. We've done a lot of things in the Remedy ITSM stack, both to support Smart IT initiatives, but also for general improvements. I mean, an example is one I just showed you with 9 about the deployment manager console. But in terms of the specific point about hierarchical groups, I didn't work directly on that, so I'd invite Samir, are you still on the call, or Peter, would one of you be better to pick that one up than me?
Yeah, I mean, I can comment on it. So as you said, it's not that we say we'll never change anything around the mid-tier UI. We do make small tweaks. We even introduced, at least occasionally some smaller feature here and there. I think we want to set expectations that we're not doing a major redesign of the mid-tier UI, right? As that focus on building really a modern user experience for service desk age and change, etc., is really focused on smart IT, right? The specific feature that you were talking about is ultimately used to restrict access to tickets and to control to whom a ticket should be assigned to and not assigned to, and because that is, this kind of access function should be happening consistently and does happen consistently between mid-tier and smart IT, we had to implement this on both sides, right? So there are functions when you need to enforce certain rules that would have to be implemented on both sides, right? But as John said, the key point is, yeah, there may be smaller optimizations here and there in the mid-tier UI. It's just we don't plan to make major design changes on it. Right?
Okay.
And once again, if you would like to ask a question, please signal by pressing *1, and we will take our next question.
On the subject of multi-tenancy that you just now mentioned, if we have customized the data access model in ITSM, it does automatically reflect on smart IT as well, right?
When you say the which module, sorry?
The multi-tenancy or the data access model.
The smart IT certainly consumes and reflects permissions from Remedy. If that's what you mean. I mean,
yeah, the role-level security rules apply the same way on both sides, right? So we ultimately, smart IT accesses the data on the Remedy server using APIs, etc., and it adheres to the same rules when it comes to role-level security, right? Who can see what?
And we will take our next question. Your line is open.
Hi, my question is, I don't know, today's discussion is related to smart IT, but I had a related question to somebody else asked earlier regarding Innovation Studio. Is that going to be available for on-premise install, or is that something that's better addressed at a separate forum?
I mean, I can answer the specific question. There's no plan to offer that as an on-premise offering, at least not at this time. And obviously, when you want to go into the detailed capabilities around Innovation Suite and related components, we'd have to set that up for separate sessions. But again, no plan to offer that as an on-premise offering right now.
And once again, that's *1 to ask a question. And we will take our next question.
There was a previous question also on how do we handle table fields that are built as customizations on the mid-tier. So typically, we have been using these table fields to show data that is fetched from external systems, up-to-date data that is fetched from external systems. So is it reasonable to say that since we can't show those custom forms and tables in Smart IT now, can we use these provided actions to launch the mid-tier? Then they can do all the work there, look at those tables, and then return some results probably back to Smart IT.
Yeah, great question, and almost spot on, but you would probably use a URL action rather than the provider action. It's just the other type of action. But yes, other than that, I'm being pedantic, yes. That's definitely an option for you.
And once again, that's *1 to ask a question. And we'll take our next question. Caller, please check your mute function.
Sorry about that. So we have several users that have custom searches on incidents, changes, and assets, with a specific query. And the specific query can be, changes with a certain product type to a certain group, things like that. And they save that search, and they run that constantly. And my understanding of Smart IT Evening 2.0 is that, you cannot do searches with specific field values in the search criteria, or is it now possible?
You can what you can do is use the consoles. Basically build filters on the that was the intent. That's the design intention, really. We don't quite have the same query by example structure that mid-tier has, where it's driven from the record form. But the consoles are where you can build up, nice filters with multiple criteria in and run them. And one thing to bear in mind now is that console is more configurable. You can and when you've added new fields to the console, you can filter on them too. So hopefully that gap should be bridged. And really the intention is always that people use the console for those searches. There is one limitation we're looking to, again, in a future release to drill out, which is that at the moment the additional filtering is on custom fields. So there's a bit of a workaround if you need to add a filter on an out-of-box field that is not currently out of in that filter list, then it needs duplicating and mirroring, which I know is a bit clunky, and we will aim to resolve that hopefully in the future. But that's the design intention really, is that the console should have a very usable, familiar to many users kind of construct where they can build queries up. To give you a bit of insight to the thinking behind that, right back from the start of Smart IT, one of the things that particularly novice users found very difficult was searching on, at least at first, searching on the kind of advanced search bar on records and things. It wasn't, especially for people more used to sort of building filtered searches in at the time what are they called, more modern tools or more recent tools and consumer tools. It seemed a little unfamiliar, whereas we kind of modeled the search on the console on much more kind of modern paradigms where you build up individual components of the filter. You can easily click them in and out. So again, if that's not adequate for what you're needing, please let me know and we'll drill into that further. But I'm hoping that's going to give you the answer.
And once again, that is *1 to ask a question. And it appears we have no further questions at this time.
Okay. Well, if that's the case, I'd like to just thank everybody very much. There are literally hundreds of you on this call. There's a lot of people giving up an hour and a half of their time to hear what we've got coming, and that's very inspiring, actually. So I hope the presentation has been valuable. We are here to help. We really want you to be able to use Smart IT. We're very proud of it. We have a lot of very successful and happy customers using it, but we are aware that this configurability has been a challenge hopefully until now. But this journey is now really getting to an exciting point, and so let us know what we can do to help you. We are aware that a lot of the people on this call have been around Remedy for, in some cases, a long time, some cases a short time. Well, welcome everybody regardless, but we most of us are Remedy people too, and have been for a good long time, and we want to be there helping you move forward. So let us know what we can do to help. Thank you again for giving up an hour and a half of your morning or your afternoon, or even in some cases probably the middle of the night. And we look forward to, I always look forward to doing these calls. I look forward to doing the next one, and let us know what we can do to help. Thank you.
Thank you, John, for the presentation and all the panelists and everyone that attended. As usual, for contacting BMC, you can contact us via the social media channels, as well as technical support through the web, phone, email, and our knowledge base is available via the support portal. Again, thank you again for joining this month's Connect with Remedy. The recording of the webinar and Q&A will be published a week from today. Thank you.